Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on May 28th, 2022, and is current through the Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode Memento Mori, so beware of spoilers. And if you are in one of the regions where any of the Star Trek shows have not yet aired and you are trying to stay spoiler-free, be sure to check the episode article on TrekCore for time codes for each of our stories tonight in order to avoid them. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Brooke Horton. Brooke, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
All right, Brooke, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
I feel like this is pretty obvious. Strange New Worlds.
Oh, yes.
Obviously. But so because that's a little bit too on the nose and because we're going to talk about other parts of Strange New Worlds, I'm going to go a little more personal and say I'm getting really geared up for what I'm still going to call STLV this year and our international friends who get to come back and join us. Because as lovely as it's been, I mean, I've seen you twice in the last year.
Yep.
So you definitely check the box for, you know, with your British accent. But
yep.
I'm ready to see more. I'm ready
to see actual international
for,
people.
For all of our missing friends. Yeah. The ones that we haven't seen in so long. So if you're Jen or Ian or Dee or Connie, I mean, you guys, I am excited to see you. So that's honestly where my heart is. It's been 2 years of a lot of time on our own. And I'm really excited to reunite with those friends.
Yeah, STLV last year felt very American, didn't it?
Yes, except for you, which you mean you were great.
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to this year's STLV feeling much more normal than last year's did. You know, last year's happened. I mean, there were lots of people who pulled out at the last minute because, yes, we'd had the sort of vaccination summer, but Delta was really starting to take off in a lot of places. And that meant lots of people didn't feel comfortable coming. And the US still had sort of strict travel bans in place for Europe and a bunch of other countries. Yeah,
even if they wanted to, they couldn't have, right?
They literally could not travel to the US. And then, so, and by Chicago, you know, things are starting to open up a little bit. But, you know, I think lots of people sort of were like, well, I'll give Star Trek Mission a year or two to get going before showing up myself, especially if I'm going to have to pay $1,200 for a plane ticket, you know, fly abroad and all of that. But STLV, of course, is the long storied tradition for many fans who are, and so, you know, thrilled to get the opportunity to see people again. So yeah, I'm very excited people are coming back.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you the thing I'm feeling excited about Star Trek this week. And yeah, Strange New Worlds, of course, but as you say, we talk a lot about Strange New Worlds this episode. So I'm taking us way, way back. The thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is a little show, which you may have heard of, called Star Trek: The Next Generation, which... Yeah. You've heard of this one? Yeah. So Sir Patrick Stewart, well, I guess he wasn't a sir at that point in time. And Jonathan Frakes, little known actors, Brent Spiner, Gates McFadden, Marina Sirtis, etc. Yeah. So 1987 and 1994. So anyway, I just finished a rewatch of The Next Generation as part of I'm doing a big sort of rewatch of the whole Star Trek franchise for, well, what was the 55th anniversary. It's now, of course, we're in the 56th anniversary year, and I'm still going, but there's a lot of Star Trek to watch. I do try and do it once every 5 years. I did it for the 50th, did it for the 55th, I'll do it for the 60th. And yeah, so I just got to the end of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I just loved rewatching The Next Generation this time around. I had such a fabulous time with it. I was vibing with the whole show so hard. I was having a great time watching season 6 and season 7 and just revisiting a bunch of these episodes that I hadn't seen in a really long time. I just had such a nice time watching it. And, you know, it's just like, of course, I've seen all of these episodes, you know, 10, 15, 20 times.
That many?
Yeah, I mean,
every episode, you think?
Not every episode, but like I have seen every episode of, like, my least watched episode of The Next Generation, I must have seen 7-8 times. I'm sure of it.
Okay.
And so it's not like I saw new things or discovered anything new about it. I just really enjoyed rewatching it this time around.
Like it resonated for some reason.
I was just really in the mood for that kind of Next Generation sort of mood and aesthetic, and you know, the dialogue and the episodes. So yeah, I just had a great time rewatching Next Generation. And honestly, like, I had a great time rewatching the original series, and I had a great time rewatching Enterprise as well. And now I'm, you know, into season 2 of Deep Space Nine, and I'm starting to have a great time watching Deep Space Nine as well. I'm just like, I'm just totally vibing with the Trek franchise at the moment. And it's been so delightful because it's been this nice opportunity to revisit all these great shows. It's not like I'm saying, oh, I haven't watched some of these episodes in 10 or 15 years. You know, I watched them all fairly recently, but just like this time around, something's hitting right for me and I'm really enjoying it.
Do you think, well, I want to say I already know the answer is no. I was going to say, do you think Picard at all has had any influence on your enjoyment of TNG? But you just said, I mean, Picard, the tones couldn't be more different. So
yeah.
if the tonal feel of TNG is what you were really vibing on, Picard probably had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, they do. To me, they do feel pretty different and disconnected from each other. I mean, not in a bad way, right? Like, I like Picard a lot, but it is a very different show from The Next Generation. You know, I mean, we'll see once we get to season 3 how much, you know, whether it feels like TNG season 8, right? We're all joking it's TNG season 8, but based off of the Star Trek Picard that we've seen through season 1 and 2, I kind of don't think it's going to feel like TNG season 8.
Yeah, I agree.
So it was sort of like, and you know, I've talked about this in previous episodes, you know, Patrick Stewart, he plays the character quite differently. He sounds quite different because of his, you know, age now. And so you line up the two characters, and yes, they're obviously the same character, and yes, they're the same man, and they're 30 years apart, but they do feel quite different from each other. So
agreed.
There were some things like when I watched All Good Things last week, and, you know, you get the last scene between Picard and Q, and having just over the last couple of weeks, you know, seen and rewatched a bunch that last scene in the season 2 finale between Picard and Q. There's a lot of parallels between the two of them. So that definitely, you know, sort of was more emotional, I think, than it otherwise would have been. But it's also All Good Things, right? Like one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever, and it's extremely emotional in and of itself. So it didn't need Star Trek Picard in order to make it be a meaningful scene. It just added a little bit of depth to it.
Well, before we started recording, you and I were shooting the shit, just talking about the never-ending fount that is being a geek, because we'll always be excited about something. And it's interesting because you said, you know, you and I became friends because of Star Trek, which will always be there. So in theory, we should always be friends, unless we have a falling out on this show or something. But
I mean, we've not got into the meat of the discussion yet,
no,
Brooke.
Not yet.
You could say something very offensive.
I could. But one of the things that we all, I think, as Trekkies look for in something like Picard is we're like, ooh, I want to watch Picard and I want to feel nostalgic feelings. But we forget that, like, you don't need that from Picard. You can actually go watch TNG whenever you want to. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, we don't actually have to bring. It's great when we do get that. And to your point, like the whole, you know, reunited in season 3, but the original stuff is always there for us. And I think all of us, most of us, kind of see it like that warm blanket, you know, that you go back and revisit. And like, for whatever reason, right now, it's just exactly what you need to be watching. And I think that's cool.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, Star Trek fans have been buzzing this week from the premiere of the 4th episode of the series Strange New Worlds, Memento Mori, a tense starship battle episode in which the Enterprise goes toe-to-toe with the return of the Gorn. Constructed along similar lines to other famous submarine battle episodes of Star Trek, like Balance of Terror and like Starship Down, Memento Mori plays off the teases of the Gorn laid down in earlier episodes, though our crew does not lay eyes on one of the lizard creatures in the flesh. We discussed this quite a bit, how to honor the idea that people either haven't seen the Gorn and in some cases might not believe they exist. Episode co-writer Davey Perez told Ryan Britt over at Inverse. There's a lot we still don't know about the Gorn. What was fun for me was using parts from Arena we do know to inform some of their behavior. He went on to say about how Memento Mori ties into Arena that, quote, our goal is never to undo people's experience with the original series, but if we can manage it, perhaps to give us an interesting perspective to consider that lines up with the original stories. And as to whether they considered actually showing a Gorn in this episode, Perez said, I think there were some early ideas floating around where we might have caught a glimpse of one, but there was always the idea that we should hear about them and begin to dread the Gorn without ever actually seeing them. Once we decided not to see them at all, the episode sprang to life. And talking of Laan Noonien Singh, who shares backstory with both the Gorn and with Khan, Perez says that she serves as sort of an Easter egg basket for fans. She's an outsider and new character, and she also gets to be an audience surrogate. A lot of Laan's backstory is going to be new information to existing fans as well. That's what's fun about playing in this era of Star Trek canon. There are a lot of stories and ideas that have been touched on in the past, but still have lots of potential to explore. Brooke, what was your opinion of Memento Mori and the decision to reintroduce the Gorn?
It was a hell of a ride. But you know, I have a Gorn t-shirt that's like this, like whimsical. And now I'm like, God, like when I walk by Bobby Clark's table now, it's going to take like a whole new, like, you know, I've always thought of the Gorn as being something a little bit, you know, well, it was campy when it was in, when it was in TOS. And like, I mean, so let me ask you this, because I think Arena is not one of the TOS episodes that I tend to either accidentally or purposely find myself rewatching.
Yep.
I have other favorites. So I don't have as great a memory of that one. So when you're reading in the article, when they were saying bringing some elements of the Gorn from the TOS episode, like this murdery brutality, like was that part of it, or did they really lean into that for Strange New Worlds? Like, what do you feel like they actually borrowed from?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even borrow the likeness, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think they are leaning into the way the Gorn captain's initial response in the episode is just to try and kill Kirk, right? And that they attacked the colony at all. I think they've definitely sort of dialed that up to 11 in terms of creating now this much more, honestly, frightening backstory for this race, you know, where now it's they really are like, you know, sort of very savage, I think probably is the right word for it, and really scary as a result, you know. And I guess we'll see. I tend to think that there was another interview with Henry Alonso Myers about the Gorn, and he sort of hinted that even though we didn't see them in this episode, we, the audience, probably would see them before the end of the season. And he talked a little bit about kind of the approach they had taken to how to do that, whether the characters themselves will see them. I mean, I guess that decision not to have the characters see them is sort of what gives them the flexibility then to align with Arena, because in the episode, there is this sort of moment where they're like, that's a Gorn, right? In the sense that someone has just told us that that's a Gorn, and now we're telling you that it's a Gorn rather than we know what that looks like. But there is not that sort of, like, I think everybody's assumed and interpreted from the episode that was sort of the very first encounter in any way with the race. But there is enough kind of obscurity within that dialogue that it actually could just be, this is the first in-person encounter with them,
right? And
that there have been encounters, you know, with the race in the way that we see in this episode.
But I think they gave Lon that great line, right, about how nobody, you know, people have seen them, but they just don't live to tell anybody about it. I mean, that was great. That was like a little exit route they gave themselves, you know? Yeah, I thought it was great. And honestly, I think based on how that episode went, I'd probably be okay if we never saw them. Like, I mean, they just told such a brilliant story without, you know, and then when you actually think about the Gorn, you got to think about prosthetic versus CG, you know, I mean, it's like, it's a very distinct looking creature. So I mean, I'd be okay if we never saw them, I think. Like the Borg were always such a looming threat, like hovering in the distance, even when we hadn't seen them, you know, their reputation preceded them. And I would say that the Borg are the scariest race we ever encountered. And I'd say the Gorn's totally up there, which is crazy to me that Strange New Worlds in 4 episodes is going to introduce somebody on par with the Borg for like just pure terror. Yeah. Because there's no governance on their brutality. You know, the Borg were totally without conscience, and the Gorn are obviously driven just by pure murderous instinct, you know? Right. Ugh. Yeah, it was intense.
I think if they do eventually show the Gorn, they're obviously taking a risk. I mean, it is not one that is automatically destined to fail, right? It's a very talented creative team, and they could show us a really terrific modernized version of the rubber suit from Arena, But it's like, we've sort of walked down this path a little bit before, 2 times before, one in A Mirror Darkly, where you had that just awful CGI Gorn, which everybody hated.
That out.
Yeah,
I think I blacked that out.
It is
I'm gonna Google
bad, yeah. And then for the video game connected to the 2009 movie, they brought back the Gorn, and there's another interpretation and modernization of the design for the Kelvin timeline, which, I don't think people particularly cared for either. I mean, it's such an iconic design, but it's also one that's so like late 60s. You kind of can't do exactly that, but you also can't stray too far from it, because if you stray too far from it, people aren't going to kind of connect the two together in that way. So yeah, it's a big swing to decide to actually show them, whether they do or not. And yeah, it's one that's not automatically destined for failure, but it's not one that's also automatically destined for success too. I mean, they're definitely, the track record on doing a new version of the Gorn is not a successful one up to this point.
I Googled it and I'm looking at the first result is like the 10 worst CGI moments in Star Trek. And it basically it looks like an upright velociraptor with like pecs.
Yes.
Like,
a really obvious CGI, like bad CGI version of one.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I think they told such an amazing story, and who knows how much we'll actually see the Gorn, like I don't think when we saw the Packlids come into Lower Decks, we knew there was going to be so much Packlid content coming, so who knows if the Gorn will be around a lot. But yeah, I think I'd still be okay if they were if they stayed a legendary threat,
Yeah.
It was an awesome episode.
It sure was. Well, in addition to the Memento Mori writers, Strange New Worlds regular Christina Chong, who plays La'an Noonien Singh, has also been doing the interview rounds to discuss the character and her feature role in this week's episode. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Chong talked about how her upbringing as the daughter of an English mother and a Chinese father has informed her portrayal of La'an, with the racist abuse that she suffered in her own life as a child growing up in the UK, informing her approach to the character of La'an, whose ancestral connection to Khan draws similar comparisons. It was only really when I was about 14 and I went to a performing arts school where everyone was from a different background that for the first time I felt accepted for who I was, Chong said. They all were talented and they all wanted the same thing. And that's parallel to the crew on the Enterprise. La'an comes onto the Enterprise and they accept her for who she is. It's been an incredible journey how Star Trek has enabled me to use my experience and put that into her. Timing-wise, it all sort of clicked. Speaking of the Khan connection and her preparation for the role of La'an, Chong said, quote, I had to do a lot of research. There was a 2-week quarantine period where I just completely blitzed the original series and Discovery. I didn't really know anything when I'd been given this role. I accepted the job, obviously knowing that it's a huge franchise. And when they told me about Khan, I was just like, wow, this is an amazing character arc. And it's crazy that you get to know so much about her in such a short period of time, especially in episode 4. You get a full history of what she's been through and understand why she's so guarded. And speaking of La'an's arc in the season's first 4 episodes through Memento Mori, Chong said, the Enterprise crew is her new family. In a way, she's taken her role as security chief to protect her new family. I think why she's holding herself back is that for her, if you love somebody and then they get killed, so it's better to remain guarded, keep the distance. But then when she's faced with her biggest fear, her walls start to come down. And I think she really starts to realize she's got to take these risks if she wants to really live. Well, Brooke, we've already talked a little bit about La'an Noonien Singh, but what do you think about the character's arc so far in the series?
I'm enjoying it a ton. And I mean, we both know that Kurtzman era Star Trek, well, probably not Lower Decks, but Discovery certainly has really taught us a lot about living through trauma and processing trauma. And obviously we've all been living through a collective trauma. Well, I mean, just the last 2 years, but I mean, we've had tumultuous lives, even in our 30 odd years. Mm-hmm. So I mean, and Star Trek's always been something where you could go to it and kind of hold up, look at it and hopefully see something mirrored back that, you can apply to your own life. And so I find it really brave that she shared everything she did in this article. And I think it's amazing that it's not amazing. She had the experience. God, of course, not something I can honestly relate to. We've all been bullied, but right. I've not been bullied for my ethnicity based on where I've lived.
Sure.
So I had that privilege, but to have that something constructive come from that. And then hopefully she knows, she's new to Star Trek, but if she doesn't know already, she'll know that when she's in the Star Trek family, you know, people are going to really, really connect with her character and with her as an actor, and she'll change lives. And I think that's really special. I think this is going to be definitely a character that teaches us something, you know, and that's personally what I want out of Star Trek.
Yeah, I am so impressed with this show and the way that they have given each of the characters a really great, and even over 4 episodes, quite well fleshed out set of backstories.
Isn't it amazing? It's amazing. Yeah. It's like a TARDIS of storytelling. Like somehow we got in there, and in 4 hours, we've learned a ton. It's amazing.
Yeah, we just know like a lot now about each of these characters. They each have something interesting about them that we've been exposed to, and that has informed a story, right? Una's heritage.
Oh yeah.
M'Benga's daughter. And I think at the top of that kind of pyramid right now, in terms of having that being one of the new characters, particularly who has that sort of developed arc. La'an, I think, certainly, you know, has the most kind of interesting version of that story, because there's the 2 components to it, right? There's this, obviously, this Gorn backstory, and then there's the Khan Noonien Singh backstory, which we've only really scratched the surface of up to this point. And I think Christina's just doing a really terrific job, and is also, I will say, a fabulous person. I had the opportunity to meet her at the red carpet premiere for Strange New Worlds, and was so enthusiastic about this project and what she had to do and the experience of being in Star Trek, even as somebody who was coming to it not being a Trek fan, right? She talks about it in the interview. She didn't really know anything about Star Trek other than its existence and that it was a big deal, landed the role, and then, you know, has sort of done a huge amount of sort of preparation and sort of immersing herself in it. And she was one of the people who said that when they released the opening credits for Strange New Worlds, like a few days before the show itself premiered, and it kind of, you know, started lighting up the internet, not very much on social media, but just happened to be on social media at that point in time, seeing everybody respond to watching the opening credits, which she herself was also watching for the first time, was a really kind of profound moment for her in terms of connecting with the fan base. And because she was feeling all these emotions about watching the credits, and we as fans were feeling all these emotions about watching the credits, you know, it was sort of that like instant kind of, okay, I think I get this now. I think I get why people feel this way about it.
Interesting.
Yes.
Good on her, though. It takes a lot of them like years until they go to a convention and then they figure it out, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think she, you know, the actress is great. The character's great. Love all the kind of pieces that we've seen so far. And yeah, really kind of can't wait to sort of see more of this character evolve over time.
Agreed.
Well, shifting gears to the Kelvin timeline, the big question continues to be, is the next Star Trek movie going to get made this year? Supposedly, the studio is still on track for a late 2023 release for the movie. Well, Dr. McCoy actor Carl Urban talked a little bit about his knowledge of the behind-the-scenes logistics of arranging filming for a new Star Trek movie as part of the press rounds for The Boys, which he has been doing in the last couple of weeks. I have heard that it is happening, but I've been hearing that for the last 3 years, he said.
Isn't he just all of us?
All I know is they are developing it. They're writing a script, and I know 100% that we all want to come back and do it. So I think it's just a matter of logistics and timing at this point. He went on to say, quote, "Where there's a will, there's a way, and there's definitely a will. So we would love to come back together and make one of those. I mean, The Boys is a great hang, a great cast, but Star Trek is also. It's just one of those things you want to do it for the experience of hanging out. You never laugh so much as when you're working with those guys." Urban's comments matched the tone and tenor of Spock actor Zachary Quinto, who told the Hollywood Reporter that, "I don't know that we will do it this year. I don't know when it will happen. And I always maintain that I would love to do it. But until I get something concrete, we're shooting on this day. Here's your script. Get ready. I'm in a wait and see pattern. I'm not really attached to it in any way until I have much more definitive certainty that it's actually happening." So it seems the will is there, at least from the cast, but that logistics continue to be the big hurdle towards filming this year and meeting that late 2023 release date. And if I was a betting man, I would probably put money on them shifting it back to 2024 or later. Brooke, what are your feelings about the next Star Trek movie?
I wish you could see me. I'm just going to keep grinning and giving 2 thumbs up. Like, I just like, okay, if you guys say so. Yep. Like, it just, I guess it's not obvious, but I would love more movies with that crew. But I feel like the actors sound exactly like me and like you probably, which is, yep, we all want it. And yep, we all hope it'll happen. But like realistic, but then it asks the question, like, who the hell's in charge? Like you and me want it, Alex, and the actors want it. Like who doesn't want it? You know, like who are the people who are actually, I don't know, suits somewhere.
Yeah.
But no, I would absolutely love it, but I'm not pinning anything on it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, and this is a topic I try not to revisit more than like once every few months with just sort of like hey, let's do a quick touch base on the next Star Trek movie, because
there's not much to say.
There's never all that much to say about it. I mean, I think at this point we can probably pretty definitively say, since it's about to be June 2022, we're halfway through 2022. There's only 18 months before the current release date for this movie, and the actors are still saying we have no idea when we're going to do this and when the film's going to go in front of the cameras. That you probably don't need to hold that date in December of 2023 on your calendar for going to the Star Trek premiere, right? Like, I don't know. It doesn't yet feel like it's enough of a real thing. I mean, I tend to believe it's going to happen, right? It feels like it's going to happen, but not in the way where it's, you know, like we can have any level of confidence about a specific release date for the movie. And it's just it's so funny and it's so weird to hear the cast talk about it, and as you say, in exactly the same way that we talk about it, which is like 2 thumbs up and a smile on our face, right? Like, we're looking forward to doing it. We really want to do it, but like, I got nothing for you in terms of concrete information.
Seriously, when you tweet out the link for this episode, I will retweet it with the face that I make when once a year somebody says, what do you think about this? Is a forced grin and 2 thumbs up.
Looking forward to it.
But I mean, all things considered, I don't plan to cease being a Star Trek fan ever.
Right.
So whatever, you know, they'll get to it when they get to it, I guess, and I'll be around to watch it.
It'll come when it'll come.
Yep.
Well, and lastly this week, Star Trek licensee Factory Entertainment have revealed their latest San Diego Comic-Con Star Trek exclusive, and it's an extension of their popular line of Star Trek-themed teacups that they started 2 years ago. Joining the Enterprise A and the USS Excelsior teacups from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, which sold out online very quickly when they were made available to fans in the summer of 2020, the USS Enterprise D teacup, which is spotted briefly in Captain Picard's quarters in Star Trek Generations, is now available from the company. Though it is listed as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, you don't need to be at the convention in order to buy it. The cup is available for purchase from Factory Entertainment's website and will begin shipping out to pre-orders the week of San Diego Comic-Con in July. The teacup can be yours for $45 and production has been limited to 1,000 pieces. This is obviously a slightly less iconic piece than the Enterprise A and the Excelsior teacups, and those sold out within a matter of hours. This one's now been available for pre-order for a few days and you can still get one, but I wouldn't hang around if this is something you're interested in. With it only being 1,000 pieces, I do expect it to sell out eventually, and by eventually I mean it's not going to take all that long, and they'll be selling them on site at San Diego Comic-Con. So like, if you want it, what I'm saying is go out and pre-order it now, right? Like, get your hands on one, because if you dither and delay, you might not have the chance. Brooke, Star Trek has obviously had a long line of funky, interesting, weird Star Trek drinkware. Is there anything that you're like, I remember that from an episode and I would like to own that piece of, you know, whatever that may be, glass, bottle, etc., etc.?
That's a good question. I thought you were going to ask me if I wanted to get the teacup, because I don't think I'll get the teacup.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's I'm getting the teacup because I'm
well, you're also English.
Yes.
And like you'll have people over and you'll be like, would you like me to be mother? And you'll do the the sugar, and that's all very British stuff.
Exactly.
I'm bopping around my house with like a sturdy coffee mug that I lose.
Yeah, and with a little bit of bourbon in it too, right?
Yeah, depending on the time of day, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Honestly, I still want to get my hand, and I can order it, but I want one of the Canar bottles.
They're excellent.
And I also, and this is so weird because I think my family had one, but like the mugs that they use in Deep Space Nine for their Ractigino was actually the same mug that my parents had, that because it had like the dashboard grip with like the low center of gravity, but like that broke in the early 90s, I'm sure, like the family cup we had, you know. So I still really want one of those, to be honest, like, because to my point, a teacup is all about like being slow and taking a moment, and I'm more like running around the house, so I could use like a heavy bottom coffee cup, you know, for my Ractigino. So yeah, I need one of those.
That's the one where anytime, and I'm not saying it happens very often, but occasionally I will get asked for ideas for, like products.
Yeah.
And when it's in the kind of like drinkware space, that's the one that I automatically go to, because it's the one that we just haven't, like, obviously
people would love it.
Yeah, like go on eBay and you can find like old versions of it, probably from the same like company they got all the Deep Space Nine ones from.
Right.
In the same way that for the Voyager ones, you can still find those Nissan mugs, online. They come up occasionally and you can purchase them. But like someone should remake them. I mean, maybe the reason is they're still copyrighted or trademarked by somebody.
Well, have those people make them.
Yeah, right. Like
have those people roll out their old plans.
Someone should be able to make these things, and hey, I think Star Trek fans would buy it, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I've got my Excelsior teacup, my Enterprise A teacup. I've got my Voyager Captain Janeway mugs on the way from the documentary project. I want a Cisco Ractagino mug to fill out the Star Trek drinkware pantheon.
And if you're being honest, like, wouldn't that one get used probably the most?
Oh, sure.
Just because it's functional and sturdy, I mean, again, you're English, so I don't know how much tea you drink. I've never seen you drink tea.
Well, so I mean, I guess this is probably why I'm now an American citizen as well. I'm not a big tea drinker.
Oh, so they ran you out of the country.
Yeah. Basically,
okay.
I was told you can stay and you can drink the tea, or you can get the fuck out of here.
That's sad.
And I left.
Did they say that in person, or was that like a letter?
It was a letter from the Queen, actually.
Oh, God.
Uh-huh.
So that's what she does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've often wondered what role she plays.
Yes. It's not that I don't like it. I don't like coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. Never have been. Never will be. Never picked up a taste for it. Tea. I like tea. I'm just too much of an impatient person.
Oh, sure.
I don't like that whole sort of process of boiling water and then letting it steep and figuring out, is it too hot still for me to drink it because I'm a baby?
Do we drink sun tea here? You can make it in huge batches and maybe get a bacterial infection.
Yeah, no, that sounds awful. I don't like
it's
that.
very American.
I don't like that sound. I don't like the sound of that at all.
Very American.
So it's like, okay, if it's going to take me 10, if I don't enjoy that experience of making tea, which I don't, I'm like, if I'm thirsty, I'll just drink a glass of water, right?
It's better for you.
10 seconds later, I'm done, finished.
Yep. It's better
ready
for
to
you.
move on with my day and whatever comes next.
Yep.
So
have we ever had bourbon together? Will you sip a bourbon? I know I've sipped a bourbon in proximity to you.
Yes, I am not a big spirits guy. If I'm in a space where if I were invited to a bourbon tasting, I would enthusiastically say yes and go and drink it, but it's not something I typically choose for myself if I'm just hanging out with friends.
Well, then this may be the worst thing for you because it's two things you don't really like, but it could surprisingly be like the perfect marriage of things. When Picard premiered, season 1 premiered, I steeped Earl Grey tea in my favorite bourbon, and it was quite delightful. So if you ever come visit me in Michigan, we'll try it.
I mean, I
won't make a lot of it.
I will happily drink that 100%.
It's interesting. I'll get out my little Star Trek rocks glasses. So,
All right, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guest and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Brooke, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
So I don't dare theorize around you because you have really good theories. So I just don't.
All right, wish at me.
I have lots of wishes. So one of my wishes is kind of close to home, but I missed the 4K theater experience. Well, I bought a ticket for last weekend, but
You've been doing this whole outside thing, Brooke, and it's been very disappointing.
I know. I've gotten way more sun than a Trekkie should. But I had my ticket, and then I realized that the theater I got it at wasn't 4K, so I just didn't go.
Yep.
It was also, again, it was a nice day. Wanted to get outside, Here in Michigan,
I can't empathize with that.
I know. Here in Michigan, man, when it's the right weather, it's going to be like hot as Vulcan soon, and when it's like 65 degrees and sunny, you have to get outside. Anyway, I didn't go, but we do have a new 4K theater with Dolby Atmos and like all the bells and whistles that just opened. And a friend of mine went to the screening, Brad, and he talked to the manager after, and supposedly they want to re-show it, the director's edition of a motion picture in 4K, but he's actually working on getting the guy who headed up the 4K restoration.
Oh yeah, David Fain.
Yeah, he's going to try to get him to come to Grand Rapids.
Oh, cool.
And do like a speaking thing after. So my wish is that this actually comes to fruition and is something that I can participate in and actually see it the right way. Because I don't know. I mean, you've talked to me plenty, and I'm sold that the director's edition is amazing.
Yes.
But to not see it in 4K seems like a weird thing for me to do. So I don't know. I guess I could do it at home, but I don't have Dolby Atmos. Yeah. I don't know. Going to Thad's house. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I went and saw it last Sunday on the big screen here in the Annapolis area, and it was great. I mean,
was it 4K?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I'm not enough of a movie person to know the difference.
Okay.
I was just like, I want to see it on the big screen.
Yeah.
Yay, it's on the big screen. It's way bigger than my TV at home, right? Like that is the level at which I sort of play.
I do not doubt you were saying those words out loud in the movie theater.
Space. Yeah. Uh-huh. Fortunately, it was a very empty theater, so nobody was offended.
I heard that when my friend Brad went to see it, the whole like USS Petoskey crew was there, and they took up a row all in uniform. I'm like,
oh, cool.
Right, that's excellent representation.
Yes, that is cool.
Yeah, and I have one more wish.
Yes,
and
please.
It really ties back to Strange New Worlds and what we already talked about. But I don't want to compare the shows, but in some ways you can't help compare the shows. And Discovery being the other sort of ensemble show we've been treated to recently. There's something about Strange New Worlds where I feel so much more immersed right away.
Yep.
And my wish is that continues for the entire season. My wish is just that it is just so balanced. And, I was speculating on the nature of Pike as a captain and the way Anson Mount plays him. And I think the way that he's written is a huge part of why we're getting to know these characters so early, because it's not this chain of command sort of ship. I mean, it is. Everyone has a job and a responsibility, but he's such an open character. Mm-hmm. All the characters are acting open right out of the gate. They're having dinners and opinions are being solicited and opinions are being freely offered because they know he will listen. And like those are storytelling devices that are so smooth and subtle. But I think it's because of the type of captain he's written as, where we're getting to know these characters intensely. I mean, even Ortega's just these little like quirky things that like Picard, if she had said something like that on the bridge, like a little quip on the bridge, Picard would have been like, he would have frowned her down. You know what I mean? Because it would have seemed insubordinate or not at work, whatever. But I mean, so we know that character hasn't even gotten their big like moment in this episode yet. Yeah. I already feel like I know them, So it's just, there's something about the tone of the ship and the sort of familial, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
I totally know what you're saying. Yes.
I think it's why we feel like so connected so quickly. And I love it. And my wish is that it continues, like that they've obviously already filmed all of season 1, but like, I hope they take the feedback from the fans that like this show is something special.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. None of the characters are ciphers, right? They're not mysteries.
Even Spock.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we know all of these characters now to some degree after 4 episodes. Even the characters, as you say, who've not had their kind of right. We've not had an Ortegas episode and we've not had a Chapel episode yet. That's okay. We're only 4 episodes in, right? Yep. Like I'm sure sort of feature roles for both of those characters are coming. But even given that, I still feel like I know Chapel and Ortegas very well because they've had substantive, important things to do in the episodes that we've seen up till this point, and that has allowed us to learn something about them in the development of the plot, right?
Absolutely.
One of my biggest criticisms in Discovery season 4 of the way in which they tried to integrate some of the supporting casts in more prominent roles is you had these moments in episodes where the episode would just like come to a complete dead stop. And it was like, I am a member of the bridge crew and I have something to say about my past, right? And it was very much just like, you could point to the moments, 4 or 5 of them across the episodes where it was like, well, everybody says they want to know more about these characters. So let's make sure to put something in this episode.
Shoehorn it on.
Yeah. And you know, like, I surfed back home and therefore I know how to do this type thing, right? Like just some of these moments which just felt really clunky and were very much like box checking exercises following the feedback that the fans had given. Whereas the way that Strange New Worlds has done it has just been so well done. And partially, I think the reason for that is Strange New Worlds has made a more intentional choice, which Discovery did not do early on and has kind of been hampered by it. The cast is much smaller, right? Yep. The Strange New Worlds cast in terms of who are the characters that you see week to week, different in cadence, right? Like, you know, how many Detmer, Owo, Reese types do we have on Strange New Worlds? There's really just one that I can think of, which is Chief Kyle, the transporter operator.
Yeah.
And because he's not on the bridge, because he's in the transporter room, it's like, it's okay to me that he just remains sort of a supporting character, plot device that we don't really know anything about him and his history. And because they have this sort of smaller cast they're working with, they can kind of share that out a bit more sort of thoughtfully than Discovery has been able to, with many, many more characters.
Right.
And the really strong through line in Discovery, of course, which is that it is Michael Burnham's story. It's not the ensemble story.
Right.
And I just think the show and we as fans are just always going to continue to kind of struggle with, like, what's the right balance for that, when I think Strange New Worlds sort of has sort of concocted its formula in such a way that it's not that the writers are better, it's not that the producers are smarter or more talented, it's just that the sort of equation of Star Trek Strange New Worlds is a little more concise, a little more, you know, it knows better what it is and what it's trying to do.
Oh, it totally understands itself. And maybe Mr. Kyle will have an awkward wedding episode and then show up as the chief of engineering in the next show, you know?
Yeah,
You never know.
Uh-huh.
But like, stay with me on this one. So you remember in Lower Decks, the I don't remember which episode, but the plot where Boimler pretends to be from Hawaii,
Yes.
Or Oahu,
Yes.
Just to fit in.
Yes.
So that scene, imagine that scene in Discovery never happened. Imagine that scene tweaked just a little, and it would totally work in Strange New World. Like, I think they could actually try to pull that off. And which is amazing to me, that like this show it's just like the best of every Star Trek in one space.
Yeah.
It is a little bit Lower Decks, and it's a little bit Discovery, and it's very TOS, and it's also TNG, you know, it's a little bit of everything. And it's like, I mean, hats off to the creatives, because that's a lot of threads to spin into like one perfect tapestry, but feels like they're doing it.
And I can talk about it just ever so slightly because the preview's out, but like episode 5, next week's episode, is what I would describe as a classic low stakes Star Trek episode.
Okay.
Right. It is a day in the life episode, which is great after this week's episode, which was so high stakes and
high action,
propulsive and high action. Next week's complete 180. It's really the first live action low stakes episode of Star Trek we've gotten since Enterprise went off the air.
That's very thoughtful.
It's actually my favorite of the season today.
Ooh, okay. I'm excited.
All right, let me tell you. Funny you mentioned Lower Decks.
What's your wish or your theory?
So this is my theory. Lower Decks. We're halfway through Strange New World season 1, right? We've got 6 more episodes to go, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 6 more episodes to go of Strange New Worlds. And then after that, it's Lower Decks season 3. We've gotten the briefest of teaser trailers for Star Trek Lower Decks season 3. I think at some point within the next month, we're going to find out exactly when the Lower Decks season 3 release date will be, and we'll get a proper trailer for it and set us up for a summer of fun, returning to the Cerritos for another 10 episodes of fabulous animated comedy from Mike McMahon and crew. So yeah, my theory is I think we're, now that kind of Strange New Worlds is well established and we're inching into the summer, right? By the time this episode drops, June will be but 2 days away. And so I think we got a little bit about Lower Deck season 3 at Mission Chicago, but I think at some point within the next month, I'm going to venture by the end of June, we will know when will Lower Deck season 3 be coming, and we will have seen a trailer for it, because at that point, Strange New Worlds will very much be winding down, and it's time to start building up the excitement for the next thing, which is going to be Lower Decks, and then the next thing after that, which is going to be Prodigy 1B, and then the next thing after that, hopefully, will be Picard season 3. So yeah, I think, we may get a few weeks in between in which there's no Star Trek. I know, brace yourselves, there's the possibility there might be a week in which we don't get new Star Trek. That'll be the first time that's happened since August of last year.
All the old stuff's there.
We might get a couple of weeks of no Star Trek between the end of Strange New Worlds season 1 and Lower Decks season 3, but I think we're going to find out pretty soon when that Lower Decks season 3 premiere is going to be.
Well, so how many seasons of Lower Decks, if you were going to guess, how many seasons of Lower Decks do you think we'll get?
Well, I've already, the 4 are a given. So it's like, how many more are we going to get? I'm going to guess maybe 6 or 7. I'd love them to go 7, right? I'd love all the shows to go 7, just from that kind of, that's sort of considered the successful Star Trek watermark. I mean, Picard's obviously not going to go that far, but it was never going to go that far.
Do you think any show will ever go past 7? Or do you think because that was the 90s precedent, they're just going to be like, nope, it's the magic Star Trek number.
I mean, they might, right? In the sense that it's not 26 episodes over 7 seasons, right? Even if you go 7 seasons, you're still only doing less than half the number of episodes overall, given we're at 10 episodes a season right now.
Let's make that the watermark. Let's make the actual episode head count.
Yeah.
The
176 episodes. That's
okay.
When we'll let you go.
I will take it. I will take it. And I'm excited for release dates. At work, we get one floating holiday of PTO to observe something that's significant to us that may not be on like the traditional calendar. Of course, last year I took Star Trek Day, you know, but I wouldn't be adverse to
a religious
lower
holiday.
Decks. Yep. As a not religious person, you know, I'm the community I'm most affiliated with is Star Trek. So maybe Lower Decks release day. So I hope your wish comes true, and then we learn soon.
Me too. Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Brooke Horton, for joining me today. Brooke, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I'm on Twitter at the Replimat.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Brooke. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.